I simulated the next 10 seasons of Formula 1, and some of these results and driver transfers will shock you. There are a total of 214 driver transfers in this simulation, so you guys are not gonna want to miss it, and I recommend watching throughout the entire video. My name's Chris, welcome back to the channel. Hit that like button, subscribe, share with your friends, and most importantly, enjoy the video. In 2023, Max Verstappen wins his third consecutive World Drivers' Championship as he takes 14 wins on the year, 391 points, and finishes P1. No real surprise so far as to what we've seen in the actual 2023 season. Charles Leclerc takes 235 points, finishes P2. Sebastian Vettel actually takes one win, 182 points, he finished P3. Carlos Sainz takes 153 points, he finished P4. George Russell takes 118 points, finished P5. And Sergio Perez takes one win, 108 points, he finished P6. Red Bull win their second consecutive World Constructors' Championship if we include 2022, followed by Ferrari P2, Aston Martin P3, Mercedes P4, Alpine P5, McLaren P6, Williams P7, AlphaTauri P8, Alfa Romeo P9, and Haas in dead last. Now we get to the crazy parts. Mid-season, Sebastian Vettel goes to Red Bull, Sergio Perez goes to AlphaTauri, Yuki Tsunoda goes to Williams, Nicholas Latifi goes to Haas, Kevin Magnussen goes to Alfa Romeo, Pierre Gasly goes to Alfa Romeo, Oscar Piastri goes to AlphaTauri, and Valtteri Bottas goes to Aston Martin. And at the end of the year, heading into 2024, Bottas retires, Carlos Sainz goes to Williams, Nicholas Latifi goes to Red Bull, Zhou Guanyu goes to Mercedes, Sebastian Vettel goes to McLaren, Robert Schwartzman goes to McLaren, Kevin Magnussen goes to Haas, Alonso goes to Ferrari, Lando Norris and Alexander Albon both go to Alpine, Daniel Ricciardo and Felipe Drugovich go to AlphaTauri, Russell and Piastri both go to Alfa Romeo, Izuma, a reserve driver in the game, goes to Aston Martin, and that leaves Pierre Gasly, Sergio Perez, and Esteban Ocon as free agents heading into 2024, and heading into 2024 there is a regulation change to the chassis and durability departments. In 2024, Max Verstappen wins another World Drivers' Champion. That overall makes him a four-time World Drivers' Championship. He takes 12 wins, 382 points, and finishes P1. Fernando Alonso takes one win at 228 points, finishes P2, and he actually beat Charles Leclerc, who also took one win. He scored 221 points. He finished P3. Granted, Leclerc did have 3 more DNFs this season than Alonso. Lance Stroll took 2 wins, 164 points, and finished P4. Looks like Aston Martin is climbing up the ranks. Red Bull win their second consecutive constructors of the simulation, followed by Ferrari P2, Aston Martin P3, Alpine P4, Mercedes P5, McLaren P6, Williams P7, Alfa Romeo P8, Haas P9, and AlphaTauri dropped to dead last. In the driver transfer market, Robert Schwartzman goes to Aston Martin mid-season, and Pierre Gasly goes to McLaren. And at the end of the year, Sebastian Vettel retires from Formula 1, Felipe Drugovich goes to Red Bull, Esteban Ocon goes to Mercedes, Daniel Ricciardo goes to Mercedes, Mick Schumacher goes to McLaren, Perez and Zhou Guanyu both go to Haas, Lewis Hamilton and Nicholas Latifi go to Ferrari. Charles Leclerc goes to AlphaTauri. That sucks because they're the worst team. Fernando Alonso goes to Alfa Romeo. Oscar Piastri also goes to AlphaTauri to partner alongside Charles Leclerc. Dan Ticktum goes to Alfa Romeo to partner alongside Alonso. That leaves George Russell and Kevin Magnussen as free agents. And heading into 2025, there is a regulation change to the aero and power departments. In 2025, Max Verstappen wins his third consecutive Constructors' Championship, or his fifth in his entire career, as he takes 9 wins on the year, 340 points, and finishes P1. Lance Stroll takes 2 wins, 220 points, he finishes P2. Lewis Hamilton takes 1 win, 152 points, he finishes P3. Robert Schwartzman takes 1 win, 137 points, he finishes P4. Carlos Sainz takes 2 wins, 126 points, and finishes P5. And Kevin Magnussen takes 1 win, 82 points, he finishes P9. Red Bull win their third consecutive Constructors title of the simulation, followed by Aston Martin P2. Williams move up to P3 with Sainz and Tsunoda. What a driver lineup that is. Alpine finished P4. Ferrari dropped down to P5, clearly because Hamilton, Latifi. McLaren P6. Mercedes dropped down to P7. That's rough for them. AlphaTauri at P8. Haas P9, and Alfa Romeo in dead last. In the mid-season, Kevin Magnussen goes to Red Bull, Teo Pourchaire went to Mercedes, Carlos Sainz went to Mercedes. That left Ocon and Drugovich as free agents heading into the next season. And at the end of the year, going into 2026, Lewis Hamilton retires from Formula One. That leaves an open seat at Ferrari. Robert Schwartzman goes to Red Bull, Christian Lundgaard goes to Mercedes, Dan Ticktum goes to McLaren, Mick Schumacher goes to Haas, Max Verstappen takes Lewis Hamilton's seat at Ferrari. Jehan Daruvula goes to Ferrari as well. Esteban Ocon goes to Aston Martin. Felipe Drugovich goes to Alpine. Liam Lawson goes to Alfa Romeo. And that leaves Goat Tiffy, Guang Yu Zhou, and Teo Pourchaire as free agents heading into 2026. And also going to 2026, there is no regulation change. In 2026, Max Verstappen wins his 4th consecutive World Drivers' Championship, making him an overall 6-time world champion as he takes 8 wins on the year, 328 points, and finishes P1. Lance Stroll takes 3 wins, 261 points. He finishes P2. Telling you guys, Aston Martin's getting closer. Ocon takes 1 win, 220 points to finish P3. Kevin Magnussen takes 3 wins, 204 points. He finishes P4. And Lando Norris takes his first win of his career and 145 points to finish P5. Aston Martin win their first ever World Constructors Championship, followed by Ferrari getting carried by Verstappen in P2. Red Bull dropped down to P3. Alpine P4. McLaren P5. Williams P6. Mercedes P7, AlphaTauri P8, Haas P9, and Alfa Romeo once again still in dead last. In the mid-season driver transfers, Nicholas Goat Tiffy goes to Mercedes, Alexander Albon goes to Ferrari. That leaves Daruvula and Christian Lundgaard as free agents. And at the end of the year, heading into 2027, Zhou Guanyu goes to Williams, George Russell goes to Red Bull, Christian Lundgaard goes to Mercedes, Nicholas Goat Tiffy goes to Haas, Jehan Daruvula goes back to Ferrari, Teo Pourchaire goes to Alpine, Richard Verschoor goes to AlphaTauri, and that leaves Alexander Albon and Mick Schumacher, Robert Schwartzman, Oscar Piastri, and Felipe Drugovich all as free agents. And heading into 2027, there is a regulation change to the aero, chassis, and durability departments. In 2027, we have a new World Drivers' Championship, and it's Lance Stroll as he takes 10 wins on the year, 348 points. He dominated to finish P1. Esteban Ocon takes 5 wins, 302 points. He finished P2. And Charles Leclerc, he's back, takes 1 win, 152 points, and finished P3. Aston Martin win their 2nd consecutive Constructors title of the simulation, followed by Williams in P2. What a big jump they had. We got Ferrari P3, AlphaTauri carried by Leclerc in P4, Red Bull P5, Alpine P6, McLaren P7, Haas P8, Alfa Romeo P9, and Mercedes actually in dead last. That is hilarious. I don't think I've ever seen Mercedes in dead last before. Stick with me. There's a lot of driver transfers here. In the mid-season, Felipe Drugovich goes to Mercedes, Albon goes to Ferrari, Oscar Piastri goes to Alpine, Yuki Tsunoda goes to AlphaTauri. That leaves Richard Verschoor, Teo Pourchaire, Jehan Daruvula, and Christian Lundgaard all as free agents. And at the end of the season, Daruvula goes to Red Bull. He's actually a Red Bull Junior, so that's really cool. Samaya goes to Mercedes, Bent Viscal goes to McLaren, Yuki Tsunoda goes to McLaren, David Beckman, I don't know how to say his name, goes to Haas, Carlos Sainz goes to Haas, Teo Pourchaire goes to Ferrari, Larim Zendelli goes to Alpine, Marcus Armstrong goes to AlphaTauri, Jack Aitken goes to Alfa Romeo, George Russell goes to Mercedes, and that leaves Goat Tiffy, Christian Lundgaard, Alexander Albon, and Richard Verschoor as free agents heading into 2028, and also heading into 2028, there is no regulation change. In 2028, Lance Stroll dominated, taking 14 wins, 396 points, finishing P1 and taking his 2nd consecutive World Drivers' Championship. Ocon takes 2 wins, 269 points. He finished P2. Seems like Lance Stroll is better than Esteban Ocon. Who would have thought? Aston Martin win their 3rd consecutive Constructors' Championship, followed by Alpine P2, carried by Norris, Ferrari P3, Red Bull P4, Mercedes P5, McLaren P6, AlphaTauri P7, Williams P8, Haas P9, and Alfa Romeo in dead last. In the mid-season, we got a lot of driver transfers to cover here. We got Felipe Drugovich going to Red Bull, Dan Ticktum going to Mercedes, Goat Tiffy going to McLaren, Mick Schumacher going to Ferrari, Pierre Gasly going to Alpine, and Teo Pourchaire going to AlphaTauri. That leaves Jehan Daruvula, Bent Viscal, and Larim Zendelli all as free agents. And at the end of the year, going into 2029, Fernando Alonso sadly finally decides to retire from Formula One. I don't know how old he is, probably like 46 or 47, but that's crazy. Liam Lawson goes to Williams, Christian Lundgaard goes to Red Bull, Fittipaldi goes to Mercedes, Ralph Boschung goes to McLaren, Sato goes to Haas, Zendelli goes to Ferrari, Richard Verschoor goes to Richard Verschoor goes to Aston Martin, Yuri Vips goes to Alpine, Pierre Gasly and Roy Nissany go to AlphaTauri, Esteban Ocon and Samaya go to Alfa Romeo, and that leaves Charles Leclerc, Alex Albon, Nicholas Latifi, Felipe Drugovich, and Theo Pourchaire all as free agents heading into 2029. And heading into 2029, there is a regulation change to the aero and power departments. In 2029, Lance Stroll is a 3-time world champion as he takes 11 wins on the year, 374 points, and finishes P1. Lando Norris finishes P2 with 195 points. Richard Verschoor finishes P3 with 184, and Charles Leclerc takes 5 wins, 166 points, and finishes P4, and he only drove for like 5 races. Aston Martin win their 4th consecutive World Constructors Championship with Alpine P2, Ferrari P3, Williams P4, Red Bull P5, AlphaTauri P6, McLaren P7, Haas P8, Mercedes P9, and Alfa Romeo in dead last. In the driver transfer market, Jehan Daruvala goes to Mercedes, Dan Ticktum goes to McLaren, Theo Pourchaire goes to Haas, Charles Leclerc mid-season goes to Aston Martin. That's why he only got 5 wins and 166 points, but he really won all the races he was at Aston Martin. Alexander Albon goes to Alpine, Robert Schwartzman goes to Red Bull. That leaves Ralph Boschung, Yuri Vips, Richard Verschoor, Sato, Fittipaldi, and Christian Lundgaard all as free agents. And at the end of the season, Pierre Gasly decides to retire, Sato goes back to Haas, Ralph Boschung goes to Ferrari, Richard Verschoor goes to Aston Martin, Roy Nissany goes to Alpine, Oscar Piastri and Nicholas Latifi go to AlphaTauri, Tremblay, who is a reserve driver, goes to Mercedes, Correa, who is also a reserve driver, goes to Red Bull, Atier, I don't know how to say his name, he's a reserve driver, he goes to McLaren, Marie Larson, the female reserve driver, a legend of this channel, goes to Alfa Romeo, and Michalski, another reserve driver, goes to Williams. This happens because the teams don't have enough money to spend on people, and in case you guys didn't know, I put all reduced settings in this simulation. That leaves Charles Leclerc, Alex Albon, Jehan Daruvala, Liam Lawson, Yuri Vips, and Theo Pourchaire all as free agents heading into 2030, and in 2030, there is no regulation change. In 2030, Lance Stroll becomes a 4-time World Drivers' Champion as he takes 10 wins, 368 points, and finishes P1. Richard Verschoor takes 5 wins, 192 points, he finishes P2. Max Verstappen takes 176 points and finishes P3. Lando Norris takes 164 points, finishes P4. And Robert Schwartzman takes 1 win, 135 points, and finishes P5. Aston Martin win their 5th consecutive Constructors title, followed by Alpine P2, Ferrari P3, Red Bull P4, Williams P5, McLaren P6, Mercedes P7, AlphaTauri P8, Haas P9, and Alfa Romeo in dead last. Mid-season driver transfers, we got Mick Schumacher going to Mercedes, Christian Lundgaard goes to McLaren, Albon goes to Ferrari, Robert Schwartzman goes to Aston Martin. That leaves Tremblay, Atier, sorry I can't pronounce that, Ralph Boschung, and Richard Verschoor all as free agents. And at the end of the year, Lando Norris retires from Formula 1. Atier, whatever his name is, goes to McLaren. Tremblay goes to Mercedes again. Lorim Zendelli goes to Aston Martin. Drugovich and Boschung both go to Alpine. Zhou Guanyu goes to Alfa Romeo. Murray, who is a Ferrari reserve driver in the game, goes to Ferrari. That leaves Fittipaldi, Mick Schumacher, Alex Albon, Christian Lundgaard, and Robert Schwartzman, all as free agents heading into 2031. And heading into 2031, there is no regulation change. In 2031, Lance Stroll wins his 5th consecutive World Drivers' Championship as he takes 10 wins, 365 points, and finishes P1. Kevin Magnussen takes 275 points, finishes P2. Esteban Ocon takes 196 points and finishes P3. Max Verstappen takes 164 points, finishes P2. Daniel Ricciardo takes 161 points, finishes P5. And Lorim Zendelli takes 3 wins, 152 points, and finishes P6. Aston Martin win their 6th consecutive Constructors' Championship, followed by Red Bull P2, Ferrari P3, Williams P4, AlphaTauri P5, McLaren P6, Mercedes P7, Alpine dropped down to P8, Haas P9, and Alfa Romeo in dead last. Mid-season driver transfers, we got Samaya to Williams, Dan Ticktum to Red Bull, Marcus Armstrong goes to Ferrari, Esteban Ocon goes to Aston Martin, Robert Schwartzman goes to Alpine. That leaves Boschung, Michalski, Zendelli, and Correa all as free agents. And at the end of the year, Goat Tiffy and Max Verstappen both decide to retire from Formula 1. That moves Verschoor to Williams, Charles Leclerc goes to Mercedes, Jack Aitken goes to Ferrari, Felipe Drugovich goes to Ferrari, Yuri Vips goes to Aston Martin, Roy Nissany goes to Alpine, Liam Lawson goes to AlphaTauri. That leaves Dan Ticktum, Marcus Armstrong, and Esteban Ocon as free agents heading into the last season of 2032. And going into that season, there is a regulation change to the aero departments. In the final season of this simulation, Lance Stroll becomes a 6-time world champion as he takes 8 wins on the year, 349 points, and finishes P1. Richard Verschoor takes 205 points, he finishes P2. Yuri Vips takes 4 wins, 174 points, he finishes P3. Kevin Magnussen takes 168 points, he finishes P4. And Mick Schumacher takes 4 wins, 139 points, and finishes P5. Aston Martin win their 7th consecutive Constructors title, followed by Williams P2, Red Bull P3, Ferrari P4, AlphaTauri P5, McLaren P6, Mercedes P7, Alpine P8, Haas P9, and Alfa Romeo in dead last. And of course, there's driver transfers mid-season, and actually quite a lot this time, with Daniel Ricciardo going to Red Bull, Liam Zedeli goes to Mercedes, Teo Pourchaire goes to Alpine, Roy Nissany goes to McLaren, Mick Schumacher goes to Aston Martin, and Esteban Ocon goes to Ferrari. That leaves Tremblay, Correa, Aitken, and Yuri Vips all as free agents. And now it is time to take a look at the final stats for all 10 years. At the end of all 10 years, here are the final stats. Aston Martin won 7 Constructors titles and Red Bull won 3. Lance Stroll won 6 World Drivers' Championships. Max Verstappen won 4. Stroll had 70 wins. Verstappen had 43. Ocon had 13. Charles Leclerc had 7. Richard Verschoor had 5. Mick Schumacher had 4. Yuri Vips had 4. Basically, whoever was in Aston Martin got quite a few wins. And if you guys were eagle-eyed or noticed at all, every single time a teammate was beating Lance Stroll mid-season, they got swapped out, which was really funny. Kevin Magnussen got 3 wins, then Deli got 3, Sainz had 2, Schwartzman had 2, Alonso, Sergio Perez, Lewis Hamilton, and Lando Norris all had 1 win. So guys, that is going to wrap it up for today's simulation. If you guys did enjoy and you want to see more, hit that like button, subscribe, share with your friends, join the Discord, links in the description, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye.